going to begin the discussion with the question to the director, Phil Montgomery. Phil, right before the screening was over, you said you began this process of making this film 5 years ago. What was your initial inspiration?
Again, it was a lot of things. It was the biggest inspiration for us. You know, this is a very philosophical film. It's about the big issues. It's about looking at ourselves inside, what it means to us to be activists, to be more socially and politically aware. So, on the one hand, that was something that, for me, was a personal question I was asking myself: why wasn't I doing more? And then it really came down to when I started having a lot of discussions with Matt and Hunter Brown of SDS9. We were all having a lot of, the genesis actually started in a phone conversation where we were discussing all the things that were happening, the second Bush election, Katrina, all these different things. And so that was a big thing. That was a big catalyst for us to say, why didn't we see more of that activism of the 60s and 70s that, we were all big fans of, that obviously meant a lot to us, and where we see a lot of the movements happening today still flourishing, but still not seeing that in the media and whatnot. So that was a big influence for me.
I think for me personally, I grew up in the South in a very conservative, rigid box area of the South, and fortunately with very inspired liberal parents. So I was able to see what was happening in the world and understand how, unfortunately, alive and well, some of the problems that they were fighting in the 60s and 70s were still happening. And I couldn't understand that. And looking to why weren't we more upset? Why weren't we taking to the streets when these problems were happening? And so the film really started as a conversation amongst friends. And through our careers, we realized that we had a story we wanted to tell, and we combined efforts to go out and tell it.
My question to the panelists, we can just begin with you, Javier, and move down. Is this generation, do you think, more empathetic than the previous generation, or at least the 60s generation, or is it a matter of perception?
I think it's a matter of perception. I work with students every day that are really involved in their life. I think one of the messages that society gives to young people that we try to change a bit is that they're the future leaders of tomorrow. It's a term that we really work very hard to get people to understand and realize that kind of as your film said, that if you take action now, that leadership is about process, it's not about position. Taking action now, you can make a difference now. And we know, I could spend hours talking about young people who are making a difference in their schools, in their communities, in the world. I just think it's really, how people are perceived or how media presents things that doesn't really, it's not as exciting to present the story of a young person who's tutoring kids in their spare time as to present a story of a young person who might be, breaking into homes or something like that.
Hey, Phil, I want you to respond to that.
I think one of the things that we want to stress is that by no means are we saying that there aren't amazing youthful movements that are happening in the country. I think what we wanted to do with this film is that we have the opportunities in this generation to be louder than we are. And so I think you're absolutely right in saying what you are, but I think that it seems to be quieter, and it is a big part of the media perception and what the media focuses on. And I think the right has been controlling that argument for many years. And so what we need to do is provoke and inspire people to be louder and more consistent with that voice.
Yeah, and to add to that, I do want to say that there's a part of the culture that I feel is sort of missing with that. I mean, when we look at the Facebooks of the world and all of that, social media, it's easy for us to be sort of closet activists by sitting there pressing a button, doing an online petition or whatever, but that's, is that really making a difference, or is that really being as vocal as we want to be or should be? And, a case in point, I think, is looking at the Obama administration. This is, when Obama was elected back in 2008. That was a movement. And that was an amazing moment in history for us, where I feel like for 6-7 months, the nation was galvanized, people came together, and they elected, this president into office, which was an historic election. But when we talk about regeneration, when we talk about the 50s, 60s, and 70s, we're talking about almost 2 decades of activism where it was loud. And we were talking about where was part of the culture. And I think that's where we're really saying we need to see more of, you know, and again, to your point, yes, there are amazing, great things happening. But this is a film for me personally that I always wish I could have seen in high school. I wish I could have seen, you know, hearing about the media, hearing about our education system, hearing about how I was being raised and stuff like that. Even high school featured in the film was actually where I went to high school. So for me, it was, you know, it was very personal in that respect because I felt like a lot of those kids where I was like, I came from an upper middle class family where I was like, what do I have to worry about? What do I need to do? So there is that sense of apathy where kids are definitely more aware. Kids are definitely, they're getting inundated with more media than they've ever been. But with that comes a sense of, holy crap, where do I begin? What do we do? Where do we start? And that's what I really want to bring attention to in this film.
So Megan, to that point, is it a case that this generation is just overwhelmed by media messages?
Thanks. In terms of where to begin?
Yeah.
Well, certainly there are a number of media messages. I mean, their participation among young people has increased significantly over the last 10 years. Midterm election over midterm, presidential over presidential. A lot of people wanted to compare 2010 to 2008, which from a political science standpoint and otherwise is a little bit unfair. So if you look at the general drop-off in the population, it wasn't that strange that you didn't see the same number of people that you did a couple years ago in that sense. But the numbers are in people's favor, and that's a result of groups like the ones up here that organize on the ground, and again, as you pointed out, do things in real life and go knocking on doors and get rocked a vote. We always do trigger vote, right, because it's always Halloween before election day and people wear costumes. So you have to make it fun and young and give it, you know, its own shape and vibe. And so yeah, there's a ton of artists and people doing work out there that are encouraging young people to do something. But again, I think it's about whether or not people command the respect of the habits of this generation. There was, you know, some talk about multitasking and whatnot. It's not necessarily multitasking or diminishing your ability if younger people's identities are online, that there's a lot of nuance and a consistency of an update. And to someone who is participating in a digital way, that they might feel strongly about that. I live in Washington, D.C. When you go to the White House, you go to Congress, and you know, so a leader is going to stand up and support you and your bill. They want to know how many people are going to be behind them with you, and this is a chance to actually quantify that and know how many people are signing these petitions, and it's a lot more visible. So in some ways, that's the advantage.
Okay, thanks. Did you want to respond at all to that?
I mean, I think in terms of the overall trying to change the community or the nation or the world, I think the first thing that people need to do is look within themselves and look themselves in the mirror and realize that we are part of the problem. And I speak for myself, and I challenge myself on a daily basis to make improvements in my own life. And I think once people realize that we are part of the problem and they start to change themselves internally, and that spreads with their friends and through their friends, that's where the real change is going to happen. I don't think that we don't expect change to happen overnight. We didn't make this movie assuming that we had all of the answers, but what we wanted to do is to challenge people to leave and to have a conversation with themselves and with their friends, and through that start to make personal changes. And once you make personal changes, that can lead to much bigger and broader and greater things. And I think that's what we really wanted to do with this movie.